before I get started on the presentation, I'll just give you a little background on myself and kind of, how I got to Donnelly-Boland and some of my experiences. I started within recruitment about 6 years ago. I started with a company called Atlas Search in New York City. It was a startup that was focused primarily on accounting and financial services types of recruitment. We started there with 9 people, and then over the 6 years, by the time I left and came to Donnelly-Boland, we were up to 140 people with 6 different departments. So by the time I left, Atlas Search was focused on accounting and finance, financial services, healthcare, temp recruiting, permanent healthcare, temp healthcare, office support, and a few others. But I was one of the people throughout the firm that actually got the ability to kind of work through most of the teams at the firm. The way it was set up was typically you were kind of stuck in one department, but I was able to work remotely from Pittsburgh throughout all the departments. And throughout my experience, I worked in the accounting and finance, financial services. And then by the end, the last few years, I was more so in the healthcare, on the healthcare team, which is a little bit more applicable to what we do here at Donnelly-Boland and kind of what I'm going to talk about today. We focused on a lot of nonprofits, a lot of small healthcare companies throughout New York, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia, and things like that. So I came over to Donnelly-Boland here in December of this past year to kind of take over the recruitment and kind of handle the entire hiring process from front end to back end. And obviously a lot of the clients and a lot of companies that we work with are nonprofits and small businesses. So again, that is going to be kind of our main focus today, but feel free to ask any types of questions as they would apply to any business, because as I said, I kind of have a little bit of experience kind of running throughout big companies, big banks, hedge funds, startups, nonprofits, small businesses, pretty much the full gamut. I've kind of at least worked on a little bit throughout the time. So let me get started with the presentation. So I am going to share my screen here. Give me 1 second. And we're allotted 45 minutes for this. I'm going to go over this and talk about, some things in details, maybe provide some examples. Feel free to ask any questions along the way in the chat, as Anna mentioned. And then, I'm not sure if it's going to take the full 45. If not, like I said, we have a Q&A session at the end. So I'm sure there's going to be some questions there. So let me get started. Okay. So today's our recruitment webinar to review the entire hiring process for the small businesses and nonprofits. As I said, if you have questions about as it pertains to other businesses, that's okay as well. We're going to kind of cover not just what you do during the process, but kind of your thought process and kind of what the best practices that we do here and what in my opinion, you should do along the way. So basically, whenever you determine that you are coming up with a new job, you need to strategize why you need that hire, what type of hire you need, and basically come up with, a plan of how you're going to attack, how you're going to source this hire, what you're going to offer this hire. So we're going to go over kind of the agenda of the entire process from start to finish. I kind of broke it down into these types of categories: planning and strategizing. So we'll go through each individually. Basically, when the planning and strategizing, you need to determine what type of hire you need, and you need to determine, how quickly you need the hire, what you're looking to pay for the hire, things of that nature. It's very important to just not kind of go into the hiring process blind, because when that happens, there's a lot of different mix-ups that happen and faults. It's really good to have a plan of attack, what you want, and know what you need before you go in. So let's start talking about the, we'll get into all these other ones, the job descriptions, the advertising. We'll get into those more specifically individually as we go on. I kind of want to break it down here and go over kind of step by step what the kind of the thought process is and going behind it, because I think it kind of works hand in hand. So planning and strategizing. Whenever you're planning on the type of hire, the first thing that you need to do is determine what type of hire you need. So basically, there's 4 types of hires that I broke down here. There's permanent hire, temporary or contract hires, temp to perm hires, and per diem hires. I'll go through each of those individually. So basically, a permanent hire is somebody that you have a service that is predictable. It's necessary throughout the year. It's going to be someone that you need to come in. It's going to be repeatable services, a schedule that's able to, consistent schedule throughout the year. And there's no length or term on how long this person will be working for you. They are a employee of your company. Oftentimes there's either full-time benefits since they are a full employee or at least partial. A lot of times people think of permanent hiring and temporary hiring and confuse that with full-time and part-time. They're completely different things. And I'll kind of go through that. So essentially with a permanent hire, that doesn't necessarily mean that this has to be a full-time employee. And with a temporary hire, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a part-time employee. So you can hire somebody on a permanent basis to work 2, 3, 4 days a week. And unless they're getting that 40 hours a week, they're not technically a full-time employee. They can still be a permanent hire because it could be something where, you might have an employee that works every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because and they have a set schedule throughout the whole year. It's not like after 6 months, their services are no longer needed. That would technically still be a full-time or a permanent hire, but also a part-time employee. Full-time employee would be somebody that you hire permanently, just a typical annual salary, kind of your typical hire. That's the majority of hires are just full-time permanent hires, but there also are part-time permanent hires. The next type of, I don't think we did the screen here, but I'll talk a little bit. There's also temp hiring or contract hiring. It's kind of the same thing. Basically for the temp hiring, this would be a type of hire that is typically paid salary or typically paid hourly, and it has a term on how long you're looking to hire somebody for. So a lot of temp types of, an example of like a temp type of position would be, you're a company and somebody's going to go out on maternity leave. So that you're going to need somebody for 3 months while they're out to cover them. That would be a contract or temporary hire. You're basically have an agreed set upon length of term. You're agreed set upon hourly rate. That person typically comes in, does not have full benefits or anything like that. They're typically paid hourly, and they're there just kind of like on a project basis to complete that term. There are also, temp to perm types of hires where basically what these companies do is they want to bring in somebody on a temporary basis to kind of test them out, see if they work first before they convert them to a full-time hire. This is very, very common in healthcare. I'll give you a great example of where this is extremely beneficial, where a lot of firms utilize this, and I had a lot of experience with this, is when you get into, let's say, a home care business, what these businesses are doing are essentially sending their LPNs or licensed practice nurses and other nurses into patients' homes unsupervised to treat them, or it could be case managers, anything that's basically sending people out to meet with clients face-to-face that are kind of on their own. Those are very sensitive types of engagements where, there's a lot of human interaction. There's a lot of synergy that needs to happen between patient and client for, it to work. So a lot of times they'd like to test these types of, nurses out, make sure that they communicate well with their patients, things are going well, and then they would convert them to a full-time hire. And the benefit of that is when you get a lot of these high turnover types of positions, it's, as we all know, anybody that's been involved in the hiring process, it is quite a process from start to finish to go through the background check, make the offer, apply the benefits, sometimes wait the month, then go through all the enrollments and everything like that, where it's a lot of time and effort spent on HR, a lot of time and effort spent with the candidate, a lot of time and effort spent with the interviewers and pretty much everyone in the process. So a lot of times, these companies will notice that they'll start going through this process and then people are leaving after 2 months. Sometimes it's the industry, sometimes it's the type of position. It's like a high turnover type of position. But whatever the reason, when you start to see trends like that, it oftentimes makes sense to kind of do a temp to perm type of hire, opposed to just a straight temp where you're rotating different people every couple of months, or a straight perm where it may not work out, right from the get-go. Kind of the terms and the way it would work for temp to perm hiring is typically what it is you have to convert this employee to a permanent hire after 90 days. So basically what this is saying is you're saying to the candidate, we're going to try you out. We're going to give you 3 months on a temporary contract. And then after that 3 months, the 90-day period, if you're still working out and we're interested, we then will convert you to a permanent hire. So a lot of the ways that that is structured is, let's say you have a position that you want to pay, you have an allotted budget for this annual salary of $40,000 a year, but you want to do a temp to perm hire. Typically what you would do is $40,000 a year converted to a hourly salary for 40-hour work week would be $20 an hour. The way that you do that is you just cut it in half for 40-hour work week. So, $50,000 a year would be $25 an hour. So essentially what you would do is you would work out an agreement with the candidate where they would work for the first 90 days at $20 an hour. And then once they hit that 90-day period, if it's still working out and you want to continue to employ them, you will convert them to a full-time salary. At that point, they will switch from $20 an hour to the $40,000 a year, and then their benefits package will start. So again, great way to have a trial run if you do have any of these types of positions. Sometimes there's administrative positions or administrative assistants or administrative clerks, or even, any type of general positions that sometimes carry a little bit of a higher turnover. This is a good option to kind of do that if you're seeing people leave within the first, 5-6 months of the position. And then the last type of hiring I want to talk about is per diem hiring. This is the type of hiring that's kind of just like on an ad hoc basis. It's for types of positions where you can't predict when a service is needed, but it's going to be needed. I'm trying to think, there's different types of recruiting firms that focus specifically on temporary hiring, permanent hiring, and per diem hiring. The way that this would be utilized, kind of in the nonprofit or small business space would be, you might have positions, maybe a community center where there's children living. I've recruited for a lot of these types of centers throughout the Bronx in New York, where you kind of have a center where there are children like underprivileged youth or whatnot that may live there and actually spend their nights there. They have rooms there and can stay there sometimes for weeks at a time. With positions like this, it's 24/7 staffing. So you have, basically morning shifts, afternoon shifts, and night shifts. A lot of times with that, there's call-offs for individual shifts, or you have a permanent employee that's covering the night shift 5 days a week, but they're going to be on vacation for the next week. So that's where you would utilize per diem hiring. You wouldn't really want to go down the temp route or the temp to perm route, because a lot of these temp people are looking for at least month-long contracts, looking to set month-long schedules. This per diem hiring utilizes kind of week-to-week scheduling. So there are candidates out there that are looking for per diem type of hires. They're typically, people that already work different jobs that are maybe looking to pick up multiple shifts in a day, or people that already have part-time jobs that are kind of looking to fill out their schedule and pick up different things throughout the week. So again, a good example would be a lot of nurses in New York City, or a lot of direct support professionals that work with these children. Some of them will basically work Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, morning shifts, and then keep the overnight shifts available and just let these people know, hey, if you have any call outs or you have anyone going on vacation, let me know and I can pick up these days. So that would be an example of per diem hiring, just basically hiring either for a one-time service or continued service, but not any type of agreed upon length. It's kind of just a hire as needed basis, almost like an on-call type of hiring. So basically running through all those are the 4 types of hires. It's very important when you're making your hire, when you determine that you have a need at your firm, it's very important. This is the first thing that should run through your mind. Is this the type of service that's going to be needed for a permanent basis, a temporary basis? Then if it's going to be a permanent basis, is this a type of position that has high turnover? Or is this somebody that's going to come in and have some longevity? And you really should determine what type of hire you're looking to make before you even start anything else, because dependent on what type of candidate you're looking to do, that can change the entire process. So this has to be step 1. If you're looking to find, temporary employees, that is, that's a whole different type of job description. That's a whole different type of, conversation with candidates, and different than contract, different than per diem. So this is step one, determine between those what type you need. And as I mentioned, the most common, and I would say probably the majority that you are going to deal with is going to be that permanent annual salary type of hire, or maybe that temporary hire if you guys do have some contract positions coming up. So again, pick the position and determine what type of hire you need for that position based on the services needed for that. So after you've kind of determined what type of hire you need, what type of person, whether that be permanent or whatnot, then it's time to start thinking of the best way to attract these candidates. And before we get into the sourcing part, you need to develop the job description. And a lot of people just kind of write the job description, or don't put a lot of time into job descriptions, or think that a lot of people don't read them. But job descriptions can be very, very important. And one thing on the other side of the business that I coach candidates on when they tell me they're not interested in jobs is, you can't always get the full picture from the job description. So you should never say that you're just not interested in a job from a job description, but it happens all the time. I see it all the time. Oh, I'm not interested in that. I read the job description. It doesn't seem right to me. So a lot of the times the person writing the job description, like I said, thinks, hey, I just need to get something on paper. Or a lot of times companies have the HR write the job description, or somebody write the job description that has nothing to do with the position. And my belief is that is a mistake. I understand that a lot of times hiring managers don't have the time to write job descriptions, but at a minimum, I can't stress the importance enough to have whoever the hiring manager is, or whoever the person that's going to be working with this person or supervising this person, whoever the person is that determined that, hey, our company needs a hire for this position, it's very, very important for that person to be involved in the job description. Oftentimes what I see is, a hiring manager will say, hey, we want to hire a data analyst for our, team over here. And then they go to HR, can you post a position? And HR, who has never worked with this team because they work in their HR function, or, somebody, yeah, I'll write that. And it's often, you Google something and just kind of get general ideas there. It's very important to make the job description applicable to not just the position at hand, because position by position can change, but also how it's applicable to your company. It's very, very good. It's kind of a way to do a little bit of selling on the position and your company before you even talk to people. There are a lot of candidates that just flip through and look for certain things in job descriptions or certain responsibilities and kind of apply to different positions based on that. So, it is a very important step in the process, and something that's often overlooked and just kind of thought of as just like a shell to get people, but it does require some more thought that goes into that. So when you are developing the job description, some of the things that you want to make sure that you do is, of course, you need to accurately reflect the core roles and responsibilities of the position. You also want to clearly indicate any of the requirements for the position. So, if you just write a job description, put it up there, and the type of position requires somebody to have some sort of licensing, or, maybe within social services, you have a position that requires a CPR license, or, what's really big within licenses and within these nonprofits or small businesses are Act 53 positions. Sometimes you need these Act 53 clearances. So if you don't put that in the job description, candidates are not going to assume that that's required or know that that's required, and you're going to get applicants that don't have that. And all that does is make you have to put in the work during the screening process, because this is a position that requires a specific certification. If you don't have it, you cannot work this position. So you want to make that clear to the candidates from the beginning. And a lot of people say, well, I don't want to turn people away, or I don't want to make the requirements too specific because, I like to talk to people that are on the fence. that is a great strategy. This is what I'm talking about only if it pertains to something that is an absolute requirement for the position. Like I said, a license that if you don't have it, you're not legally allowed to work it, or a type of position where maybe there's a system that your company uses where if you have no experience with it, you don't have the ability to train that person, they're not going to be able to work that position. That would be something under the requirements that you would want to put, you must have this or you must have that. Now, what I touched on earlier is when you don't want to get too specific, if there's, something within, maybe years of experience. I can't tell you how many times, when posting a job and people are asking me, during the posting, I ask them, what type of years of experience you're looking for? And they say, well, what do you think? I mean, we could do 1 to 3, 3 to 5. Those are the types of factors that you don't want to make necessarily a deciding factor on the job description. So that can be something where you'd put in the requirements or put in the preferences, preferred to have 2 to 3 years of experience within that. But just putting preferred before that under the required, I can't tell you how important that is, because people will take what you put on the job description for requirements very literally. And like I said, you don't want to, if it's a requirement that is kind of still debatable and you want to talk to people and kind of see, or you're not sure what type of years of experience you still want, you want to talk to different people, that would be something that you would want to make sure that you indicate is preferred. Something that is cut and dry, you want to make sure you put down the job description, because you're going to end up screening and interviewing people that don't have it, and then it's just going to be a waste of time. Some other things on the job description that can really help you out throughout the interview process, that can help the interview go a lot smoother. It can help the whole hiring process. It can help the onboarding, is to be able to provide as much information about the role and kind of predict the types of questions that candidates have. Because a lot of times within these job descriptions, a lot of positions within these industries are pretty similar throughout different companies, but the main differences are just like little specifics within the company, or different types of direct reports where, like, maybe you're an accounting a supervisor at one position, but over at this position, you'd be working in a standalone role. Those are the types of things that are very important to candidates when they're looking for jobs. I'd say, when you're looking for a job and you I always like to put myself in the candidate's shoes. You have a general sense of what you can do and what you're looking to do. And that's what you use to kind of go out and find these jobs. And then once you've kind of have that general sense of what you're looking to do, you're applying to jobs that are pretty much within the same industry, pretty standard, same type of experiences. So then the types of things that start becoming important to you to kind of differentiate the types of companies are, obviously compensation, the department and how many people you either supervise or how many people you report to, where you are in the hierarchy. If you report to one person that reports to this person that reports to this person, or if you report to the CEO, or if, what the company does, maybe the culture of the company, things like that. It's not always the easiest to come across in the job description, but as much as you can get on there to kind of differentiate how this position at your firm might be different at other firms, that would be very helpful, because those types of questions are going to come up on the interview if they're not clear in the job description. And a lot of times interviews are either 30 minutes, an hour long, sometimes on Zoom, and you might have a plan and then it just comes up answering questions because a lot of these candidates weren't clear on what the position is, who it reports to, what teams it touches, how much money it makes, things like that, because the job description was just very basic. So again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the job description might seem like something little. It's just kind of a first stepping stone to hurry up and get out to get the process started. But the more time you put into it on the beginning, the more time it saves you on the back end, if you can put this time and effort and thought into anything that might come up or anything that the candidate might need to know about this position. So after you've decided, after you've kind of strategized, you determined your hire, you have your job description, it's describing your company, you know the type of person that you want to go after, It's time to get out there and start sourcing candidates and see who's interested in this position. So the best way to do this, to advertise and source, is to basically, there's a lot of different functions, and there's a big main difference. There's proactive sourcing and reactive sourcing. The big difference is the proactive sourcing is specifically targeting a group of people, reaching out to them, kind of, going out of your way to target them without them knowing about it or coming to you. So an example of this, and I would say while I was at Atlas Search, the first 3 years that I worked there within accounting and finance, the 95% of my recruitment was proactive sourcing. And then the second half, the last 3 years, was reactive. And the main reason and the main difference was just the industry that I was working in. So, or the types of positions that you're working in. So again, proactive when you're specifically reaching out. An example of where this is probably necessary are oftentimes a little bit more higher level positions that require, again, certain certifications maybe, or certain licenses to be able to work, or positions that require certain degrees. There are certain positions that require master's degrees, or, certain types of positions that required PhDs, things like that. Those are the types of positions where that there's not a huge candidate pool within what you're looking for. And within that candidate pool of what you're looking for, those candidates are very marketable because everybody that's looking for those types of candidates knows there's not a ton out there. So the best way to find those candidates is to specifically target them and proactively source them. Because if you post the positions and wait for them to come to you, again, oftentimes candidates that are in high demand that have these types of certifications that make them very marketable, they're often not looking for jobs because they don't have a hard time finding employment. So you kind of have to pluck them from other companies, or a lot of times these candidates will be working in a position and they won't necessarily be looking to leave, but they're kind of selectively looking, where if they find something that sounds better because they might be unhappy about one or two things at their current firm but don't hate their job, that's the type of candidate where proactive sourcing is really, really important, because you might send them a LinkedIn message, or you might shoot them an email, or cold call them and leave them a voicemail and say, hey, came across your LinkedIn profile. I'm really looking for somebody that has experience in XYZ and also has this, and I see that you have that. This is why I'm reaching out to you. Would you be interested? Maybe that person doesn't have a resume online. Maybe that person hasn't applied to any jobs, but maybe the last 2 months that they're at their position, they've been really unhappy, and you just caught them at the right time, and something about your firm is something that they don't have in their firm, and they're interested. That's a good example of proactive sourcing and how it can work for that. Proactive sourcing is a lot more difficult. It's a lot more time consuming. Typically for proactive sourcing, you have to have at least 1 or 2 people, oftentimes a team, kind of just dedicated to recruitment and sourcing. So, I think proactive sourcing comes into play for, a little bit maybe bigger companies, or companies that have a more established kind of HR and talent acquisition team, where maybe they have the HR team that, does things. Maybe they have a recruitment person that reaches out to people, and then maybe they even have just a sourcing specialist. So a lot of recruitment firms have this, but some other firms with like talent acquisition teams, they have people where their entire job is just to source for their open positions. So someone like that, where they have the time and effort, obviously proactive sourcing is a great asset, because you're bringing in more quality candidates that are targeted for your position. But obviously the downside of that is there's a lot of time. So you can spend all your time proactively sourcing and maybe not get a high response rate, or you can have a month where you message 1,000 people and only get back 50 responses for whatever reason. So it's really just meant for if you have the time and resources, or you have a position where it's going to be very, very specific, and that just posting a position online isn't going to go attract that type of position. Like I said, there's not like PhDs or, people like that just looking for positions on Indeed. It's typically, through referrals or working with other things. So you need to kind of proactively source those type of people. Reactive sourcing, this is the type of sourcing that applies mostly to the nonprofit, small businesses, kind of the majority of what we do. We do here at Donnelly-Boland, we do have some LinkedIn messages, and I do use those for, some of our positions, like I said, like the accounting supervisor, or some of our positions that require CPAs or things like that. I would use that, but reactive makes up the big bulk. And what reactive sourcing is anything that's basically you're just getting your company out there and waiting for the candidates to come to you. So you can you can be proactive in the way that you reactively source, obviously, and, get a little bit better with your marketing, maybe sell the position a little bit more in the job description, spend some time there. But basically what you're doing is just putting it out there, waiting for the candidates to come to you. The benefits of reactive sourcing: you don't really have to put in a lot of time while you're collecting the people. A lot of the times, all the time is spent on the front end, like I said, on the job description. And again, I know I keep repeating this. This is why it's very important to make the job description as attractive as possible, because the more time you do that, the better success rate you're going to have with your reactive sourcing. You're putting that out there, waiting for people to come to you. So again, benefits are, you get it out there, you kind of just get to wait. But also a huge benefit of reactive sourcing is it's no longer a cold call, which a lot of people are uncomfortable with, and is probably the biggest thing that scares people away from recruitment and sales, is calling somebody on the phone who may or may not be interested, may or may not be open to your call, may or may not be happy about you calling. That's a pretty daunting task for a lot of people. For some people, it comes very naturally, and it seems, very easy. Hey, I'm going to call you. I'm trying to help you out to find something. Other people don't want to bother you. It's more of a personality thing. Reactive sourcing is very, very good for the type of person that maybe isn't as comfortable reaching out and just cold calling somebody, because if somebody already applies to your job or comes to you, that whole awkwardness of having to hurry up and sell the position when you get them on the phone or explain the reason for your call is kind of out the window, and that they're going to be open to their call because they're coming to you. That's a whole different, you call them and say, hey, thank you for applying to your position. I know you're interested, and then you start talking about the position. So that's one of the big benefits of reactive sourcing, is if you don't have the talent acquisition team in place or a recruitment team in place, and you're kind of doing some of the recruitment yourself, you kind of are forced to do reactive sourcing. Or if you have the type of recruitment team that maybe isn't as comfortable selling, and you want to kind of, make the process a little easier, reactive sourcing would be a good way. Also, reactive sourcing is the best way to go for certain positions. Again, I said proactive and reactive. It kind of depends on the position. If you think about it, the types of positions that reactive sourcing are going to be the best for are the positions where there's a ton of candidates. And by this, I mean no disrespect to any types of candidates, but typically the candidates that are maybe a little bit lower paying jobs, lower, have the positions that have lower educational requirements, and the candidates that maybe there's just more of those types of candidates out there because the positions that they're working aren't as specified or don't have as many, direct responsibilities or supervisory experience. There's a ton of those candidates out there. So positions that maybe are looking for newly grads, there's a ton of those. That's where you'd want to use reactive sourcing. You do not need to take the time to go out there and message people about a job, because if you post a job, you're going to get 40 applicants over the week, and you can kind of do that sourcing and the job description, that job posting does that for you. So that would be the huge benefit of that as well. And that's probably the type of method that I would say 99% of small nonprofits and small businesses would use typically when they want to get into the proactive sourcing type of positions. They would often either contact, recruitment agencies on a one-off because they don't have the resources, or they would, get temporary resources like buy some LinkedIn or Indeed messages for like a month to try to fill up positions. So, but again, that's proactive sourcing is often for those types. So basically, whenever that's the differences in types of sourcing. So whenever you determine what type of sourcing you want to do, you have to determine some different details before you kind of go in there. So there is a strategy behind the way that you source and the types of candidates in the industry and the type of jobs and where you post it. So first things first, with a position, before, and I can't stress this enough, what I recommend to anybody thinking about making a hire and posting a job, before you even consider posting the position online or interviewing anybody or reviewing applicants, you have to develop a salary range for the position. It doesn't always have to be, a hard number of, hey, we're going to pay someone $40,000 a year, but there has to be a ballpark, because if you do not have that, you need to do that to determine where you want to source, how you want to source, the types of candidates you want to source, and how you want to sell the position to people. So, I understand that oftentimes this can be newer positions. You don't know what you want to do. You don't know how much you want to pay. You maybe want to talk to people making a certain amount first, see what their experience is. That's fine. You can always change the salary range and change the posting or change the screening process to communicate different salary range. But you have to come up with a ballpark or at least a general idea before you do it, because what happens is if you don't do that, you're going to start getting candidates. You're going to start seeing people that you like, and you're going to start scheduling interviews. And if you don't have that ready to talk to people, what's going to happen is you're going to get people that are not interested immediately on interviews. You're going to get people that you're going to find out are immediately looking for $20,000 more than you were even thinking of paying. So there was no point to even do this. You really have to get that targeted, because again, if you're looking for somebody that's more expensive, that will be probably proactive sourcing versus reactive sourcing. If you're looking for somebody more expensive, there's different websites that probably are better for targeting higher level professionals, and some generate better volume for lower level professionals. An example of that would be, throughout my experiences, LinkedIn is really, really good for positions, maybe like $50,000, $55,000, $60,000 or higher, some of the more specific positions. But Indeed definitely outperforms LinkedIn significantly for some of those lower level positions or some of the more general positions. So determining what you want to pay and how specific and the types of responsibilities on all that really determines the strategy and how you want to source and how you want to advertise. Once you've determined that, obviously, the main ways that you can source candidates, other than referrals or, knowing somebody for the position prior, are, job career sites, Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, things like that. You can also do college outreach programs. A lot of colleges have, programs where they have either people in their like junior, senior year that are looking for internships, newly grads that enter this program that are looking for, different types of new employment. So those are really good for types of positions that are, more entry level. You're kind of open to the skill set, but more looking for the type of personality or cultural fit, because you can teach that position. That would be really good for college outreach programs. A lot of times they'll be able to send you, 10 resumes of different people. You can talk to them. And a lot of times those candidates are really open for compensation, role, and really looking to just enter the workforce. So that's a really good spot for the type of position that might not have the most responsibilities, but is extremely necessary, maybe like a typist or something of that nature, or, some type of position that's more just kind of filing and organizing, where you can teach the position because it's more about how it applies to your firm, less than having a, predetermined skill set. Targeting messaging, again, we already talked about that with the proactive sourcing. LinkedIn's probably the best for targeting messaging. Really what I use the target messaging for, again, are those more specific jobs. LinkedIn has the ability to filter candidates and send messages based on those filters. So I only use targeted messages whenever I need to basically find somebody that has a CPA or a certain type of certification, or a minimum years of experience, 4 years within psychology or something. You can apply those filters in LinkedIn to have it shoot out different types of candidates and then select those candidates to message. So that's the source for proactive recruitment. That's the best, and that's the way that you would probably use the most targeted messaging, is for those specific ones. And then obviously referrals. And what people don't realize is referral business is if not the biggest, almost just as big and important as just posting the job originally. It was something that our recruiting, when I started recruiting, that was ingrained in our brain as one of the steps that you have to do when talking to a candidate more than anything. And of course, that was a little bit different on that side. I was externally recruiting, asking candidates for referrals, but it's very important to have these communications with people. If you have a conversation with somebody that's not interested in the position, maybe you interviewed somebody for a case manager, you had the interview, it went well, but for whatever reason, they're just not interested. They oftentimes work with a lot of candidates that do the exact same job that they do and have the exact same experiences that they do. So one of the best ways to get somebody that's exactly like that person that you like is just say, oh, well, thank you for being transparent. Do you happen to have any friends or colleagues that are looking, because this position is still open, and we really liked you and think that somebody with your same skill set would be a great fit for this. Oftentimes those candidates are more than happy to send you some names, or even put you in touch with people that they know are looking too, because they feel like they're helping them out and helping you out. So it is okay to ask for referrals, especially whenever the process is already kind of ended with that. I wouldn't ask for referrals, during an interview process, before a candidate told you that something they were still interested, because you don't want it to look like, hey, we're not interested in you, but send us some friends. Or this is more saved for if somebody turns down an offer, or during the screening process, or say you have a position. I get this all the time. We have 3 case manager positions open. Hey, we want to hire you for this case manager position. You're great. We can't wait to get you started. We actually have 2 positions open, exactly the same position. Who do you know after working that might be looking, that has a background similar to yours? That literally was responsible for probably 50% of my billing, because as soon as you start getting in that type of industry, it kind of snowballs. After a year or 2 of getting these referrals and things like that, all of a sudden you have a book of business and kind of a network within that industry, and these repeat jobs that they come up, you're able to kind of just reach out. So that's very important, that for referrals. And then to touch on what I just kind of said about the repeat jobs and kind of building a book of business, candidate tracking. This is something that a lot of firms don't do. And this is something that is vital to your success if you want to have any success throughout the hiring process on a long-term basis. So you can get by not tracking your candidates if you make, 1 hire every 2 years or 1 hire a year, or it's a one-off job that you're going to hire and you're never going to need that type of job again. But for positions like a case manager, or positions like a service coordinator, administrative clerk, direct support professional, drug and alcohol case manager, any type of position like that, where that's a core service of your business that you offer, and for a fact that you're always those are going to be the types of candidates that you're hiring. So the reason why you're hiring is because a case manager left and you need to replace them, or you have a need for another one. when you go through this entire hiring process, just think about it logically. We already went through the steps that kind of go through your thought process. When you've determined what type of employee you need, you have the job description, you determine where you want to source it, you take the time to go out and source it, you take the time to review the candidates that you've sourced, kind of screen them, this and that. Maybe you have 10 great candidates for one position that you screened. You're only going to hire one, but if this person leaves or down the road, you're likely going to have to hire another. For you to not track what you did during that process or the conversations that you had or what you spoke about or who you spoke to, it would be doing you an unbelievable disservice and essentially guaranteeing that this process is going to be pretty time consuming and daunting for you every time that you need to make a hire, because essentially what you're doing is you make the hire, great, and then you're just basically working on a short-term basis, and then you have to start that process all over again whenever you have to make the next new hire. So the huge benefit of candidate tracking is, again, you talk to 10 people, you hire one. Those other 9 people might still be a good fit for the role, but this one person was just the best, and for whatever reason, you wanted that person. Let's say in 2.5 months, that person, hey, I'm married and my wife got a new job in Florida and I have to move. Oh, what do I do now? We're 2.5 months in. We just had this person. Now we have to replace him again. Instead of then posting the job, getting a new pool of applicants, screening new people and doing all over, if you tracked what you did with these candidates and the conversations that you had, you're able to then just, not only are you able to go back and maybe fill the positions quicker, but you're, again, what we talked to with the reactive versus proactive, it's now a warm call opposed to a cold call, which, again, I know a lot of people are far more comfortable making warm calls. Anybody in the world is far more comfortable making warm calls than cold calls. But not just that, it's an easier call. You already have a relationship with the candidate and you're able to kind of gain some credibility. So it can be as simple for candidate tracking. I mean, just simple notes and simple saving things, just like, a little note like John Smith. Spoke to him on 5/2, seemed great for the role, but we decided to hire Julie Smith. I'm sorry for using Smith, but you know my point. When Julie quits, 2.5 months, you go back, you click John Smith's name. There's no way that you can remember who you talked to and what you talked to them about, but a simple note refreshes your memory that, hey, I spoke to him. He was interested in the position, cleared on the salary for the position. The only reason we didn't give it to him is because we hired this person instead. Then all of a sudden, potentially that next hire could be as simple as, hey, John, I spoke to you on May 12th. I know it was 2.5 months ago. And at the time, it didn't work out. We really liked you during the interview process. Are you still open to this position because it's actually active and open now? Maybe he says, yes, that position was great for me. I'm great. And boom, you've already replaced the person without even having to do anything. And it was all just because of a simple note and conversation that you had with them 2 months ago that you maybe didn't think was important. But I can tell you, just after going through this and experience, you cannot recruit on memory. It's just impossible. As soon as you start working on one different position with one different type of candidate and you talk to 3 or 4 of them, it all kind of starts jumbling in together. So very, very important to track not only who you did and some information, but also maybe what you spoke to them about. And then on the flip side of things, it's very important to save yourself time in the process where, let's say you spoke to John Smith and you were looking to pay $45,000, but he looked great for the position. You interviewed him, offered him the position, and he, in the interview, in the offer stage, said, you know what, I know I said I was originally open. I can't take a job for less than $55,000. That's just what I would need to take this position. So, okay, I'm sorry, John, it's not going to work out. We can only pay $45,000. You hire somebody else, and then that person quits in 3 months. Well, let's say the salary range is the same for the position, which it likely will be. What I can tell you is that is not going to stop John Smith from reapplying to your position in hopes that you either want him bad enough to put the salary range up or it's a different position that has a higher salary range. So just a simple note of talk to John Smith, offer him the position for 45,000, but he needed 55,000. Then whenever you go back to repost a job and he's an applicant, or you just reactivate the job that you did post, you're gonna review these resumes and like the same people for the same positions because you liked them in the first place, something stuck out. You're not gonna remember everybody that you reviewed maybe 3 months ago for the position, but then whenever you're looking through his note, you can say, hey, there's no point for me to even call this person and start this. He's not gonna be open, he's looking for 10,000 more. Or it's a quick call, hey, John, I know you're looking for 55,000. The rule hasn't changed, it's still only 45. If you were still only open to 55, it's not going to work for you. But if it's 45, are you open? Again, just little quick candidate tracking and notes can really, really help that out throughout the process. So basically, as I mentioned the different ways to basically advertise and source with the career fairs and things like that. If I can be perfectly honest with you, the main source and the main tool and systems that people are using to generate candidates, especially as technology evolves and positions evolve, are the career and job sites. Those are always going to be like the number one option. Those are going to be the way to let every single person in the market know that you have an opening, instead of having to go out and target people. So within the job sites, a lot of times, people just kind of post to every site out there that they can get access to. And that's a great strategy when you're doing the free posts. Because why not? You might as well get out there to, as many people as you can. But there are different sites that are better suited for different types of candidates. And an example of that is, definitely within the nonprofit space and small business space, a lot of times within positions with these companies, it's very important to these companies to promote diversity. But you can't just post a job and assume diverse candidates are going to apply, or even predict what type of diverse backgrounds are going to apply. So there are specific career sites that are targeted out there to target candidates within diverse populations, whether that be Handshake, NAAHR, there's different, like I said, there's different sites out there. Again, I already touched on, there's a different site. I would use LinkedIn for more of a professional type of position, where I would use Indeed for more of that general lower level position. So the career sites, there's definitely a strategy in determining which ones you want to use that are going to be the most successful for you. I would recommend, getting them out there to as many as you can. Sometimes it can be a little bit crazy when you subscribe to 15 different sites, because as I'm going to touch here, the way that it works when you subscribe to these sites is basically you post the job, and then people go on these job sites, apply for the job with their resumes, and then you set the settings to have these resumes shoot to your inbox or to stay there on the site. So, obviously when you're managing 15 different sites and maybe 4 different jobs on each, and resumes keep coming in your box, it can get a little bit crazy. So that's why if you're going to do the free route, go ahead and do that, but it could be a lot to manage under that. So you might want to maybe strategize and pick and choose the ones that are best suited for what you're looking for, to kind of make it more manageable and a smoother process. There are different tools, which I can talk about later, that are kind of all encompassing with everything to help you organize it, help you kind of have CRM systems. But again, I'll touch on that later. And basically, again, that's the way that these career sites work. On these career sites too, when candidates apply, typically the applicants will be saved within that job historically. But then if you want to post more than 1 or 2 jobs, oftentimes you have to pay on these sites. So again, that's a give and take with these career sites, is determining when you should pay, when you shouldn't, which ones you should do it on, and really strategizing with that. We've already spoke about the tracking and the importance of it. I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in this slide, but again, the main theory behind the candidate tracking is really to just increase the efficiency of your hiring process in the future, and really, just kind of just make things run smoother and really help you build a book of business. It's very important as well to do candidate tracking, especially if you do kind of have that system or CRM system in place where you are kind of helping it manage your applicants for your positions, because you're going to get high volume when you start posting more positions. So you really do need to kind of notify, the different specifics about each ones. So after we kind of talked about the sourcing, advertising, and tracking the candidates, let's move on to the next stage of the process, is the screening and interviewing. A lot of times, a lot of companies don't do screening. They don't have, and it's for whatever reason. And the majority of the reason is they just don't have the time or resources to screen and interview people. So again, this would touch back to you strategizing in the job description what you want to make clear to the candidate. So if you have somebody at your company that is screening candidates, that is essentially a pre-interview clearance to guarantee that it's worth talking to that person. And you can use that time to ask the candidate different things. Maybe you don't want to put something on a job description because as I talked about earlier, while you might prefer it, it's not a absolute must, or maybe you think you want something, but you want to talk to people about it first. That's something you can use in the screening. And that basically the main thing that people screen for are to get any of those predetermined things that are not negotiable cleared away before we take the time to make people interview. So oftentimes the screening is compensation, location of the job, hours, schedule, and again, if they have any of the specific experiences that are necessary for the job. Sometimes that you're going to talk about the benefits, or basically anything that the candidate might know. It's basically you conveying any information about the job that you can to the candidate, and them saying, okay, I'm okay with all of that and still interested in the job. Let's go ahead and take the time to set up an interview. It's a great tool to do. I am a firm believer in screening. Again, a lot of people don't do it, and you can get by without doing it if you're very good during the job descriptions of kind of portraying everything that you want to get across, and there's really no questions about what you're putting on that job description, and you're okay doing that for positions maybe that have an open-ended salary range. Maybe you have a newly created position, you have no idea what you want to pay for it. You did a salary study, but you just don't know what you want to do because it's going to depend on the candidate. That might be something where you'd be okay not screening them and just setting up interviews for people that you like their background, because that's something you can talk to them and then kind of decide after. But again, anything that you have these determining factors of, hey, we can't hire them for this, or we can't pay $1 over 45,000, or they can't work this job unless they have a CPR license or something like that. That's something where if you have the time and resources, or have somebody at your company that has the ability to just do a quick little, it can be even 1 minute pre-screen with the candidates before you set up interviews, that saves you so much time and effort and saves so many fallouts along the process. One of the main fallout reasons for people is compensation. And the reason that this happens is a lot of times it happens with these positions where you might interview for people, and for whatever reason, people keep turning down the job, and you are really overselling your company, and you know that you can't pay 60,000 any more than 60,000. You know that a candidate's going to want a little bit more than 65, but you're kind of hoping that he changes his mind. And then after the interview process, he wants 65. You can't get to it. And you're like, oh, I wish I would have just known that no matter what, he could have done it. You could have figured that out in the screen by talking to him about that and not even gone through the time to set up that interview. But, again, like I said, if you didn't take the time and resources to do that, a lot of times you're going to have a lot of fallouts, a lot of people canceling interviews after you've got them scheduled, a lot of people not showing up for interviews. I often take those times during the screening to confirm and double confirm the days and times with interviews and tell them I'm sending them, invites now. So The screening before the interviewing, that's kind of the reasoning behind it. It's a great way to kind of weed out anybody that won't make sense, that doesn't come across on their resume. Also a great way to find out people that do lie on their resume, because unfortunately that is, a thing that we have to deal with within the hiring process. Is we are essentially taking people's word for it that everything that they put on their resume is legit. So sometimes if there's a specific system that you have to be an expert in, people will list it under their systems, but they only used it for 1 week during an internship. While they technically have it, it's a little misleading. That'd be a great thing to find out during the screen, because then you don't even have to set up an interview with that person. So that's kind of the screening. I should have gone to this screen before I started talking about that, but this slide just talks about everything I just spoke regarding during the screening process. It's, typically want to do the salary, location, schedule, hours, any educational requirements, anything that is going to be specific to that position that's not really negotiable. After you've kind of screened everybody, you want to set up the interview process. And again, with this interview process, a lot of it's going to be determined on who we think. A lot of the interview process, you want to strategize what you want to get out of the candidate and what type of information you need before you're kind of determining your interview materials and your interview guide. So, if it's a position that's more general and it's very important to you to kind of find out if it's going to be a cultural fit, if this person's a hard worker. If this person's already a hard worker, a lower level position, this person can pick up things quickly. On the interview, you might want to structure your questions more so around like experiences that they may have, or how they might react to certain things, or what they might do if instructed to do this at work, or what are their strengths and weaknesses. Those are the types of questions you want to ask for more general types of positions where you're open to the background and more so want to see if this person you're able to work with them, teach them the position. If it's a position that's a lot more specific, you need to know if this person has experience working with somebody that out of rehab, or somebody that has come from the incarcerated population, which is with some of the nonprofit. I'm just giving some examples of some companies and some of the things they focus on. If you need to know some of that, then you need to structure your interview around those types of questions, and then add on to that of touching on their experiences within that, because that's going to be far more important to the position than, hey, tell me your strengths and weaknesses. So a lot of times people have interview materials and interview questions for a position, regardless of the candidate, regardless of what they want to find out about somebody, and regardless of position. And again, a lot of times, as I touch back on the job description, same thing with the interview guide and the interview questions, I would highly, 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 highly recommend that the hiring manager or somebody working within that team that this position will be working with either writes a description, or at a minimum gets the structure there, because when you have somebody in HR write it, again, the interview questions are going to be as they would assume you'd want, but not always applicable to what you need to find out that's important to the position. So definitely put some time and effort into thinking about what you want to ask based on the position, the candidate. And I wouldn't really recommend doing any 2 interviews the same, unless it's the same position and same type of candidate, or again, if it's one of those more entry level type of positions where you're more just interested in finding out, strengths and weaknesses, personality traits, things like that. Again, that's more what I just kind of touched on there. During the interview, it's very important to, not only talk a little bit about the role and find out what you need about the candidate, but a lot of times people think of the interview as I'm using the interview to find out if I like the candidate, but you also have to use the interview to sell your company to the candidate, because while yes, candidates are looking to work for us and we're going to be paying them, we also want to entice quality at our firm. So unless you want your interviews to end up at the end just turning into a Q&A at the end, asking all these questions, it's good to get these in the job description, but also very good to convey these clearly in the interview. Give some time, either at the beginning, at the end, during, whatever, to talk about the position, talk about the core characteristics of the position, talk about the hierarchy of the position. Candidates always like to know who they'd be reporting to and if there's anybody reporting to them. Candidates like to know things like, what other teams will my position touch? They like to know, obviously, compensation. They like to know hours. They like to know location. They like to know if hours would change. You know, if there's going to be any days where they need to put in extra hours. They like to know if, you know, what the vacation package is. They like to know, you don't have to go over benefits. You can just email them the benefits, and that's something that HR can cover in onboarding, and same with vacation, but at least know the generals of that, because those are things that, you know, we all work for money and we all work for quality of life. Those are very important to candidates on top of the responsibilities, and often are overlooked, and they leave those up to HR to answer during the onboarding process. And oftentimes they don't know a ton of the job specific questions. So use your interviews not only to find out about the candidate, but also let the candidate know as much as they can about the position in the company. Last part of the process before, and we're wrapping up here, and I'll go quickly because I know we're running out of time, is making the offer. With the offer stage, basically the way I view the offer stage is you're looking to get this candidate to agree upon all of the terms that will not change, that are going to determine the offer. And that's typically salary, location, their schedule, whether it be 5 days a week, 4 days a week, and also their hourly schedule, their vacation and benefits package, their start date. And then also during the offer, one thing to be prepared about is counter offers or negotiations. A lot of times, you know, someone told you they're really into this position, they only want 50,000, then you make them the offer and hey, they thought about it, they actually need 55. Be prepared for if you're prepared for those going in, you'll never be caught off guard. And I can't tell you how often they happen in the offer stage, or, hey, I will actually need one more extra week of vacation. So within these types of details, salary, location, schedule, be prepared in your own mind to determine if there's any negotiating room with any of them and what that is. And don't obviously necessarily offer that, but be prepared to either say to a candidate like, no, we can only go here, or, you know, be prepared to get those and know what you have so that you can give a clear answer. Because oftentimes if you're kind of leading it open-ended or leading a candidate saying, oh, maybe, possibly, they start to expect that and will almost always negotiate and counteroffer you. And then also counteroffers, be prepared for someone to say, oh, well, my current firm, when I put my 2 weeks notice, actually bumped me up 10,000. Unless you match it, I cannot accept that. I can send articles after this on the downside of accepting counter offers and how you're basically staying at a company that you already told you don't want to work there, and they're never going to treat you the same, and there's never going to be the same promotion because they know that you're looking to leave. And basically it's just a short-term solution, and you have to go back to all the reasons you were looking to leave in the first place. But again, that's it. I'll send that out there. Be prepared to talk about counter offers, and, you know, just kind of be prepared to let them know that, you know, you were looking to leave in the first place and we offer this, and that's something that would come up during the offer stage. Lastly, after the offer stage, you get the verbal acceptance. You agree upon the salary, location, start date, everything like that. You typically send everything over to HR, and this is kind of when the recruitment process ends and the hiring or in the HR process starts, and that's when they start onboarding. They get on, you know, all of the certifications that need before first day, any type of clearances, FBI, background, stuff like that. They make sure that they're doing all this before that candidate's first day. Typically, it's a 2-week window for onboarding, because candidates you have to give them 2 weeks notice to put in their resignations, and that gives HR time to kind of go ahead and get all of those certifications done. And then the last screen that I want to touch upon that I had talked about, and I know we're wrapping up here, I'll be as quick as possible, is Jazz HR. This is a system that we use here, that I use in my hiring process. And the reason why I think it's very important is it's able to increase the efficiency throughout every single step of the process within the entire hiring process. As I touched upon, you know, creating the job description, determining where to send it out, tracking the candidates, taking candidate notes, determining which websites work best for which positions. Jazz HR has the ability to do all of that. Essentially, this system, you post a job to this system and it shoots it out to 19 different job sites. And then anybody that applies to any of those 19 job sites individually, their resume comes centralized to your Jazz HR system. Not only does it show which website they applied for, so that you can start to, find out which websites are working for what positions, whether it be LinkedIn, Indeed, not. It also saves their resume. It has a tab in there for discussion so that you can write notes for when you talk to that person. It has the ability then to also create job descriptions for you. They have a database with like 50,000 job descriptions pre-saved in there that you can kind of use as a starting point if you're, struggling writing one. It has the ability still to pay for posts on all of those sites. If you already have those subscriptions to Indeed, LinkedIn, you're able to integrate those into Jazz HR to where it's still posted those for those paid posts. You're still getting those same applicants, but the main benefit there is it organizes all of it for you and acts as a CRM system. So not only is it the best system I've used for sourcing on the recruitment side to really get the most exposure out there, but it's absolutely game changing in terms of the back end recruitment process for the candidate tracking, keeping things organized, setting up screens and interviews. It allows you to move candidates throughout different workflows in the system from screen to interview to keep it nice and organized to where everyone is. It allows multiple people within your firm to have access to view all of this. And really, it allows you to track all of the information without you having to do anything. It does it all for you, where before we used this system, I was using Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, basically 15 different sites all individually. And the way that we were tracking was candidates would apply, come to my Outlook. I had a bunch of different Outlook folders for the different sites and different jobs, and then would basically go in an Excel spreadsheet and write their information. This does all that while I'm sleeping in bed at night and people are applying. It does all that for you. So I can't recommend the system enough if you don't have experience with it. I'd be happy to explain a little bit more about it. I'm pretty handy with it at another time. But again, that's one of the systems. There's other systems out there that people use, but highly, highly recommend looking into if you have high volume within recruitment and you hire multiple positions per year, to look into some sort of system that can act as a CRM to track your candidates, because all you're doing is repeating your work over and over if you're really not tracking what you're doing. Lastly, the trends. Obviously everyone's kind of aware with the pandemic and how it affected hiring. There's a lot more jobs that are able to be worked remote, which it's something that you need to think about whenever you're determining if you're going to hire a candidate, because a lot of candidates and a lot of types of jobs, IT jobs, things like that, they expect remote capabilities, or at least the ability to a couple of days a week work from home. So you need to determine if that's something that you're open to or not. But that is a trend that we're moving to, is a lot of companies with homework. But also, if a lot of you are seeing just really slow hiring and really slow volume of applicants for a lot of your kind of lower paying jobs or jobs under 40,000, that's not specific to you. It's common across the board. It's gotten to a point where it's almost a pandemic in itself, where because of and Goldman Sachs did a study, and I can try to find it if you guys are interested in reading kind of the theory behind it. But basically what they said is, with the extended unemployment benefits that came out in the stimulus packages because of the pandemic to kind of offset that, it actually, if you analyzed it, you would make more money and be better off not working if your salary is $36,000 a year or less. You would actually generate more money just sitting home and collecting that. So because of that, I'm sure that all of you are seeing, maybe with an admin assistant for $32,000, right? Those types of positions. The candidates just are not applying, and the ones that do apply are typically looking for, I've seen from my experiences, the cutoff is typically 40 or higher, unless it's a college new grad. Things are starting to stabilize now. I expect them to stabilize, and I actually expect there now to be a boom, because my theory is all of these people will have been out of work for so long, and then once everything gets back to normal, they're going to have to go out and start looking, and it's going to be just kind of a feeding frenzy on some of these. So while it might have been tough at the beginning, I think it's going to be even easier for those positions coming up. But that is kind of what's been going on and what I've been seeing throughout all of our jobs. So if you are seeing with that, like I said, it's not A lot of people question their job descriptions, question their position if they're not selling it right. If it's a lower paying job, I would probably guess that that would be the reason why you were seeing low volume, and that it will, start to increase. Also, last thing with the trends, a lot of companies were doing the interviews in person. A lot of companies removing the Zoom interviews, just something to consider. The main difference with Zoom interviews is, when you do a group Zoom interview, just try to have a plan in place going forward, because when you do group interviews on Zoom and everybody's not sitting together, being able to read everyone's tone and everything like that, sometimes they can be very choppy with one person talking, waiting to see, and then this person. Just make sure if you're doing a Zoom interview and you're not sitting in the same room, you should at least have a quick conversation with the other interviewee before you do it, to make that interview run a lot more smoothly. And again, too, I would at least be open to Zoom interviews. A lot of companies prefer to bring somebody in person. You're able to tell that to people, but there are going to be candidates in this day and age that are only open to Zoom interviews. So at a minimum, I would at least be open to a first round Zoom interview to sell your company, and then maybe get them a little bit more on the hook to try to get them to come in and meet you. And final thoughts. Basically, I think that the hiring process, a lot of times people don't give enough thought into the front end of what they're doing throughout the process and in the steps they're taking. And basically their theory is, we need to get a job description out there as quick as possible and see who we get, and move through, because we want a quick hire. But what I can tell you is, the hiring process, unless you're hiring temp or per diem, is never a quick 1 week turnaround time. Post a job, get somebody. You have to wait for people to apply, oftentimes talk to those people, and then typically at a minimum, it's the 2 week notice in the onboarding. So if you can just I understand the want and the need to get things out there as quickly as possible, but front end thought before you do each step and everything that I just discussed really, really makes things run more efficiently throughout the whole process. And then as you continue to do that in the future, it then starts to become more of like a well-oiled machine, instead of just starting this process over again and again.